What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to Lumix Live. Today, as the title shows, we're going to have just kind of a general open AMA and get kind of back into hopefully what'll be a little bit more of a normalized schedule. Obviously, this year's been a bit more disjointed than it has been in the last couple years with kind of overlapping, business trips and all that kinds of fun stuff. So, yeah, hopefully we'll be back to a more normal schedule. But yeah, today, open AMA, so feel free to ask about pretty much any topic out there that you want to, get some information for. Make sure to tag at Lumix USA with your questions so I can see it. It's not that I won't answer questions that aren't tagged that way. It's just I can very easily overlook them because, when we start getting the chat going a lot, it just gets a little easier to not necessarily see them. So, yeah, so we've got that going today. I also have my S5 Mark II hooked up here because over the last couple of weeks, there's been a couple of questions that I've gotten through various different platforms, through Instagram, through Facebook, through I saw a couple of them on Reddit that I've got written down here that I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of go through, so at least there's a visual walkthrough of how to get some of the settings changed, where to find certain things, and also hopefully provide some tips on how to work with the camera in ways that maybe you'd be able to address potential concerns with your experience using the camera. So we're gonna go through that as well. But yeah, other than that, before we get started too far into this, I want to remind those in the United States about Lumix Pro services. We have the Red and Platinum tier available here. The Red tier is free. If you've bought a camera, use the QR code, follow the link down in the description, whichever one you want to do, and get yourself registered. You get your 3-year extended warranty just by registering the camera. If you're someone who likes a higher level of service and support, make sure to take a look at the Platinum level service. You can find that right on the bottom link as well. That will get you everything that the Red tier has, but on top of it, you'll get 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways. You get 20% off out of warranty repairs, so drops, breaks, things like that. You also get the maintenance side of service and support. So if you're someone who likes to send your equipment in for service and support, so things like lens cleanings, firmware updates, lens or body cleanings, all that kind of fun stuff, you have access to that with the Platinum tier. And then last but not least, you also have access to the membership hotline. So if you're someone who would rather speak to somebody for service and support, you have access to that Monday through Friday. I think it's 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And yeah, you'll have access to that as well. So I encourage you to take a look in the US at the QR code that's right below me or the link in the description. If you're joining us from outside of the United States, there is a global portal as well to see if Lumix Pro Service is available in your region and what the requirements are to get into those programs. So be sure to get yourself registered on that. Yeah, let's take a look at some of the questions here before we kind of dive in, and I'll break up some of the questions with some of the demo stuff as well. Steph here says, been having issues connecting Lumix Sync app with my S5 Mark II. Lumix Lab is better. Any news when Lumix Lab app will be updated to facilitate remote control of the S5 Mark II? So as far as details of when a firmware update and when the app update will come for adding that kind of support, I do not have details on that right now. What I can say is I'm going to drop a link to the kind of main page about Lumix Lab. I'll drop that in the chat right now. This page, if you periodically check this page, if you're not necessarily following the social channels, things like that, if you follow that page, that's where it'll obviously be updated the day we add that kind of support. But for those that don't know, this is also where you get the information of what is going to be added and what cameras will be compatible for the various features in Lumix Lab. So shutter remote control and the remote control of the camera and the settings is expected to be compatible for the S5 Mark II, S5 Mark IIX, G9 Mark II, and the GH7. So those will come with a future firmware update. As we get closer to that time, or as soon as we're ready to make an announcement about it, obviously we will be talking about it here on the stream, and we will be demoing it. So, yeah, wish I had a better answer for you, but that's kind of what we're at right now. Let's see here. James says, I'm having issues with slow writing S5 Mark II and X to a I think it's supposed to be UHSII cards for photography. Any tips on best brands of cards? Is a good question. So as far as memory cards go, let me pull up the other site that we have. So for the various cameras, if you haven't seen this list or kind of gone through and checked media cards with you, there is an entire set on our global service and support page that gives you recommendations of memory cards that we have validated and tested to work with the Lumix cameras. Now, in case of like the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark II X, well, primarily the S5 Mark II X, since that supports USB SSDs, we also have those on there as well. The thing to remember about, specifically with memory cards, right? You can find a lot of inexpensive memory cards out there. In fact, I'm in the middle of troubleshooting some challenges with one particular case where the camera was freezing up, and when we dug through and kind of did the basic troubleshooting, making sure firmware, batteries, all that kind of stuff is right, it ultimately comes down to the fact that the cards that were being used were UHS-I cards. Not saying yours clearly because you're saying UHS-II, but even UHS-II cards, you have to really watch what the brand is, what the speed ratings are for them. While we do a number of the validations based on, kind of more the video side, for how much data they, kind of really need to be able to support, those recommendations translate to the photography side as well. Now, as far as read and write speeds on the camera itself, say like clearing buffer, you always want to make sure that you're using probably the fastest card that you can afford to put into it. Part of the logic there being that when you're, investing in a piece of equipment, whether it's ours or any other brands, the last thing that you kind of really want to do is go really inexpensive or cheap on the memory cards, since that's kind of the crucial part of the whole equation. And memory cards can cause hangups and slowdowns in cameras if they are too slow, if they're from maybe brands that you don't recognize, or they're purchased in platforms where maybe you can't really guarantee that it's a genuine card. So a couple things like that. First off, I would make sure to check the list. I dropped it in the chat. Check your card against what's on that list if you're still having a problem with it. Next step usually that I kind of suggest for troubleshooting is to contact the card manufacturer. Well, that's actually like third or fourth step. The next step would be to like make sure you format it, in the camera. If you don't, if you haven't formatted it in a while, that will also cause slowdowns. If it's an old card, cards do have a life cycle before you do need to kind of replace them, because memory breaks down over time. They do slow down over time. And then there is also options from the SD Card Association for kind of a formal formatter. Instead of using either Mac OS or Windows to format the card. You can try a lot of those little things to really make sure that you're isolating out, like, is it a card problem? But ultimately, you will hit a point where the camera's buffer speed is going to be where some of the limiting factor may be, as far as how fast it can clear out the memory and write to the cards. But that's why you typically make sure that you go with cards that exceed what the maximum the camera can do. At least that's my recommendation for it. So if you're looking, for the best card recommendations, I highly recommend just going by the list of what we have validated. We have a number of different brands, from things like Next Storage, SanDisk. There are even some Sony cards on there as well, and ProGrade Digital as well. So you've got a number of options that you can choose from. And yeah, you should have the highest rate of performance when you use those kinds of cards. Let's see here. Logan says, where can I find the official Rec 709 conversion Luts from Lumix? This is a good question. I assume you're talking about from Vlog. So I have to take a look at this real quick, because the Luts that are created for Vlog, right? Vlog vGamut. These are shared Luts from the Vericam with the Vericam, the EVA 1, because the log profile that we use can be, cross-used across those cameras. You can use any of those Luts and convert them over. So what we have here, and I will drop this in the chat as well, Panasonic Luts. What I have listed right here, this is from the Pro AV website. This shows you a couple of different versions. You have the .vlt LUT files. You do not need these anymore unless you're on an older generation camera that only supports .vlt. But if you're in, an S5 Mark II, an S5 Mark IIX, G9 Mark II, any of the new cameras, you can use the .cube files. The link also provides you two versions of the LUT files. You have the actual color grading LUTs. So if you're using this for a monitoring perspective, you've got those. If you're using this in an editing side or like real-time LUT, you have access to those as well. Those are the E-E cubes. And then if you're using this just as monitoring, so you're going to throw it on a monitor, you're using the LUT View Assist function here. You also have the E-L .cube files. These particular folders, these are going to have everything from the, like 709, the aggressive 709, the various different looks that have been around for a while. These are great LUTs to work with. Remember that in general with any of this kind of stuff, usually, you still may have to do some adjustments afterwards to get it into your particular style. But there are also amazing choices out there from others that are creating looks specifically for cameras. 55M makes some really good LUTs that I like using personally. So you have a lot of choices out there. If you want just a quick, simple, free LUT setup, you've got them here. And then on top of that, if you're on a GH7 or a GH6 and you're someone taking advantage of the ARRILOG C3 functionality, you can go to ARRI's website, and we have videos about that in the past, and Dustin Armstrong made a really good video about that I will link. I'll put a card up here in the post side of this so that you can see that whole process as well. So hopefully that helps, Logan. Let's see here. Where Life Lead says, is there a way to mitigate the magnified sense of rolling shutter when shooting open gate with anamorphic? So anamorphic inherently is going to amplify rolling shutter because of the squeeze ratio that you're doing. Some of the biggest things that a lot of times people do is, so for one, you do have the stabilization system, so making sure that you're tuning the stabilization correctly for the desqueeze that you're working with. Outside of that, some cases of rolling shutter are going to be some challenges that you have with anamorphic. You're working with a sensor that is taller, higher resolution, and it's a hybrid sensor designed for photo and video. So you do just kind of have to keep some of that in mind. What I recommend for good information about anamorphic is there are two YouTube channels that I do, watch and kind of follow and listen to their advice with it. One of them is Tito Ferdinand. Let me see if I can find the link, and I'll drop that in the chat as well. One is Cam Mackey, and the other is Tito. Let me see here. See if I can find the link for you really quickly. It's called Anamorphic on a Budget.
Hi, I'm Tito Fernandez.
Okay. Autoplay is great. So anamorphic information. So like I said, I recommend looking at Anamorphic on a Budget, or you can look at some of the current stuff from Cam Mackey. He's done some pretty cool stuff with like the Katos and the newer anamorphic lenses from like Blazar. Both outlets I think can give you some really good kind of information about that stuff. And then also we have a number of videos in the past where we've had Matt Fraser on the stream where he's shared some information about anamorphic with you as well. Christy, any update if they will fix the issue at 4 tracks recording at the same time on the S5 Mark II? Unfortunately, I don't have any new information on that one. As soon as I hear anything, obviously we'll talk about it here on the stream. All things film, can I get Lumix Pro service for an S5 Mark II I bought used from MPB? My understanding is no, because you are buying a used camera. You're not buying a new camera. It's pretty standard for warranty services. But because when you register, it's going to ask you where you bought it from, and you have to provide a receipt. So yeah, my understanding is you can't, because that's a used camera. May change region to region, but in the US, that's my understanding. Wandering Trail Films. Let's see here. Do you release from competitors impact the design of future Lumix cameras? Since other brands have largely adopted 8K sensors, does that force Lumix hand for future releases? I think I understand your question. So looking, I think I understand the question. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Wandering. The concept being that because others are doing, say, 8K, does that force our hand to have to do 8K as well? It's an interesting question, because in some ways, when you look at what kind of pushes industry forward, right? I don't think we've ever really been a company that follows trends and things like that. In perspective, we were the first to bring 4K to the mirrorless side of the world. We brought it into a consumer price point. We were the first with 4K 60p in the Micro Four Thirds cameras. We had the first Netflix Post Technology Alliance certified mirrorless camera for major motion picture. And we still do a lot of those things where we look at the products, what the industry is kind of requiring in the market, right? It's one thing to say that you want certain features. It's a different thing to say, like, well, the overwhelming majority are actually needing X, Y, or Z. And I think that's a struggle all companies have, is figuring out what can be added in that is a really cool feature that's headline grabbing, but at the same time not forsake features that are actually practical and beneficial to your filmmaking or your photography. So does that mean that it forces our hand to do anything? I don't know if I would say that stuff like that forces hands into anything. I think what you see is that when one company does X, Y, or Z, it pushes every other company to do A, B, and C. Or to try to find ways to do what's being implemented better. But the timescales for those kinds of things can wildly vary. Every company, every brand has their own targets, what their research and development is saying, this is where we should be going with various technologies and capabilities. And that's kind of what drives a lot of it. Yes, you look at competition, but a lot of times you're also looking at what does the market need and what holes can we fill within what photographers, videographers, content creators, whatever you want to call the person, what those people need. So, Brendan says, any specific reason we don't get Desqueeze out of HDMI? Is it possible in a future update? Thanks, Sean. Loved you on Matt's podcast. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, Matt Danu's podcast was actually a lot of fun to film. It was a little different. It was a lot of fun actually just being able to talk about maybe a little bit more my history and what got me into this industry and share some hopeful insight for y'all about our company. To the question, Desqueeze over HDMI. So there's a couple things at play here. So Desqueeze over HDMI would mean that you would have to be able to take the signal, take the 4x3 signal or 16:9, whatever you're doing, and then apply a desqueeze to it and save that processed video file and send it out over HDMI. A couple of reasons why you really don't see it often is, one, it's a massive amount of processing to do to actually encode a video file that way in a camera. To my knowledge, I don't think any cameras do desqueeze over HDMI unless maybe you're up in a much higher level cinema camera. And even in most cases at that point, usually you're using a monitor because you need a bigger display for the output, and those monitors and displays typically have the desqueeze information that you need. If you're in a RAW format, so if you're recording RAW video, that's where you have maybe a little bit more flexibility, since you can record in the unrestricted bounds because you're really only limited by frame rate at that point. But you do also run into some problems because of resolution oddness. If you've ever tried to push a resolution that a monitor does not support, you've probably run into it before, where you either get that monitor just kind of cycles, or you get an image quickly and then it drops away. A lot of that's the stuff that's out of our control, because that would be up to the monitor manufacturer to add supported modes for those resolutions. Because if a monitor doesn't know what the resolution is that's coming in, it's kind of stuck. And then you also have the philosophies of, well, if it is going to go out over HDMI as desqueezed, what is the purpose? Is it for monitoring? Well, we kind of addressed that already, that monitoring tools have desqueeze in them already. If it's for recording, well, now you run into a different side of that argument, because now you've got a permanently desqueezed piece of footage that doesn't have the flexibility to bring in post and do the proper desqueeze or make adjustments or changes that you would need there, and you're going to end up recording in an odd frame rate, or an odd resolution that your hardware may not really understand. I know many people have probably run into this before, where you take either things like 6K or 5.8K, or even on the competitors' cameras that are doing things like 8K, right? You put it on your computer, and then you find that your computer can't actually play the footage back for you in things like VLC or Media Player or whatever other program. You have to bring it into software for it. And then you potentially run into problems of, does the hardware support decoding that video file? So it gets into a really weird, messy side of, because you have a video display standard for HDMI, and then you have a recording standard for HDMI, where those overlaps are. And if there are no overlaps in certain areas, it's usually why a company won't do it, because you can't basically, as best effort as you can, confirm that the experience for that user is going to be relatively seamless. That's the kind of generals of it. That was a lot of words for a general answer, but yeah. So D Rose says DJI RS3 LiDAR tracking supported for S9 with 70 to 202.8 question mark. I don't know. I can check. I do have an RS3 Pro back there, and I do have the LiDAR system. I've just never checked on it. Excuse me. So that's something I can take a look at and get back to you next week on. Oh, okay. Still need more coffee. It's been a slow dragging morning for me today. IS says a manual focus confirmation beep or point for manual focus photography could be really useful for S5 Mark II X and other cameras. I'm missing my focus plane sometimes when using focus peaking. See, that's a really good recommendation. I know that we have asked years ago to the engineering team about something like this, but I can definitely bring points up like that. And for everybody else watching, if you have recommendations or things that you want to see us, potentially do or bring to our engineers, perspectives, drop them in the chat, because this is what helps us get them some of that information. Yes, we watch and we listen and we see what, y'all post online and share and your opinions there, but it's one of the beauties of why, if you watched the the interview I did with Matthew, it's one of the things that we really love about this stuff is that you get to actually feed your information to us. Like, I am with the company, so this isn't like a third party kind of thing. I talk with our engineers, I talk with our planning team, I talk with all of our various different teams. A lot of us do in this company. So as you guys all tell us that kind of information, we can decipher and pass up and you know, kind of see if stuff like that's possible. So, but I can't make any promises. I'll be very clear on that one. Bed says, is there ever a chance Penny will do a refresh of the S5 IIX with CF Express B? First off, it's CF Express. CFast is a different format. Many people don't know that. But yeah, so CF Express Type B. For those that don't know what that is one of these cards. Don't drop it in my coffee. That is one of these cards. This is an Angel Bird CF Express card. There are many different types of these cards out here. Like, here's my current favorite series, which is the SanDisk Pro Cinema cards. These cards, there's a double-edged sword with CF Express. If you are someone who owns a camera that uses CF Express, you probably would recognize some of these double-edged swords. One, CF Express cards get very hot. And by very hot, I mean really hot. If you're doing really long form recording, you're really pushing data rates. So like if you're on a GH7 and you're shooting, you know, raw at 4.2 gigabit per second, and you're pumping that into your CF Express card, it's gonna get really hot, almost hot enough to the point where, you know, there's a warning on the battery doors or the card doors of all the cameras that use them that tell you these cards are gonna get hot, be careful when you touch them. That heat does a number of potential negative things to the cameras. One, it means that you have to build a much more beefy cooling solution to support, you know, the extra thermal load that you have on those cards that you don't have on an SD card. The other thing is that you also run into a size challenge because they are bigger. The reader system for them within the cameras are bigger. So when you start looking at things like an S5 Mark IIX, right? An S5 Mark IIX is designed to take the SD cards and maximize what you can, you know, push through to them. And if you need anything higher, that's where you have SSDs. And in general, SSDs are still, I'd say for the most part, maybe a little more cost-effective still. CF Express cards are starting to come down relatively in price, but you still have a pretty wide gap between a 1 terabyte CF Express card versus a 1 terabyte SSD that's been validated for use, specifically with our cameras. So would I see us doing a refresh of an S5 IIX just for CF Express Type B? Probably not. There would be so much involved doing that it wouldn't be a refresh. You know, stuff like that would be, you know, one of a reason why you would go to a newer camera kind of thing, right? Everyone always wants to look at what new cameras are going to be. And I think our track record has shown that, you know, we choose and pick the media solutions for the cameras that are based on what the product is designed for. S5 IIX, knowing that it's kind of on that cusp of, you know, yes, you can do really high-end pro cinema work with it, but it's also a really solid, high-performing stills camera. That's where you look at it and say, well, CF Express B would kind of pull back actually some of the other capabilities because of thermal, stuff like that, so you get SSD support instead. So hopefully that kind of clears it up. We do have cameras that have CF Express Type B in them. Actually, if you even go back to the S1, the S1R, both of those cameras supported XQD and then were later firmware updated to support CF Express. I've got my S1R right back there. Those use these cards, so we've had cameras that use these for a very long time. Now, granted, back in that era, you know, you weren't pushing high bit rates and stuff like that, so it was less likely to run into the thermal problem. It was a lot more about the reliability side of the cards. But then when you go to cameras like the GH7, right here, you know, GH7 internal raw recording needs that ability for the CF Express cards because 4.2 gigabits per second is so far beyond what SD cards can do, that you have to go with the proper, kind of internal media solution for it. So, all right, I want to, because we're about a half hour into this, I want to take a look actually through my camera here, and let's talk about some of the things that I've seen questions about online for troubleshooting on basic usability of your camera. One of the questions that we get a lot is, actually let me switch back to this one because I'll show the concept here. So obviously with all of our modern cameras we have rear touchscreens on them, and you run into a number of challenges where in some cases you want to have it closed like this, so you're not going to be touching the touchscreen itself, right? You don't want to accidentally change your focus point. You want to try to keep that as protected as possible, but also you have the whole challenge of, and I'm not a great example of this because I'm a right eye dominant photographer, but if I'm a left eye dominant photographer, my nose is right there on the rear screen. So oftentimes, and this is something even with the S9 that we get the questions about, you run into where you keep changing the focus point of your camera. And little known to many people out there is that we have a solution for this that does not require you to turn off the AF selection on the rear screen. It's called Touchpad AF. So like right here, you can see, Touch AF, you can turn this to Touch AF plus Touch AF plus AE, so it's auto exposure and autofocus, but we're not really going to concern with that. We're going to talk about Touchpad AF. Now, this is the mode for when you have your face to the camera. Now, what Touchpad AF does is when you go into this, it used to be, if you've come from the much older cameras, you had either on or off. Now, you have various different offsets. So if I'm a left eye dominant shooter or photographer with these cameras, or videographer if you use the EVF, you have the ability to change what region of the screen is the active region for the manual or the autofocus point adjustment. You can leave it on exact, which is literally tap on the screen and that will put the focus point in that particular point. Or if you use something like an offset, so say I use the left half offset here, that means that if I'm using the camera and I am filming or photographing with my left eye, that means that where my nose is touching on the screen, if I really bury my face into the camera, my nose is not touching an active part of the screen itself. So I don't have to worry about, oh no, I changed the focus point on the camera. It's gonna be where it's supposed to be. On cameras that don't have viewfinders, you'll also see that we have some other, kind of general tools with this. So on the S9, and I don't have my HDMI adapter here. It's the one thing I didn't think to set up, so I'll try to do it this way. So on the S9, we do also have a partial tool here, which allows you to, basically kind of adjust the way that the system works. So what this would be is that you have it either on, so the entire thing is running while you have video recording on. Then you also have an option for partial, which the partial system is going to basically say, hey, while you're recording, in a video sense, it would disable the touchscreen. So if you're someone who shoots handheld and maybe your palm hits the side of the screen, you can help avoid some of that. But there is another option that you have in here, which is on the touch tab. Actually, this one I can show on the S5 Mark II. But there is another option here, which is the touch tab. So if I turn, when it's because I have it info display on, I think I can do it this way. So the other option you have here, and hopefully you can see this. Let us drop this down. Let's bring that exposure down a bit. Okay. On the side here, you'll see a little option. It's called Touch Tab. that opens up, and in a lot of the cameras you have to actually turn this mode on. But the middle option here that now has an X on it, this is a toggle so that I can tap it once, and now it is set for autofocus tap. So now that means wherever I tap on the screen, that's where my autofocus point moves. If I want to change that, I can tap it again, and now it is wherever I tap on the screen, it will take the picture. So that's tap to take photo. If I tap it again, it turns it off. So now that means that as I move through, it's not moving that focus point anymore. So you have some control over it, depending on the camera that you have. Obviously, the kind of higher end cameras, S5 Mark II, S5 Mark II X, are going to have a little bit more control, because now you also have that viewfinder, so where Touchpad AF would come in. The S9 does have some tools in there to kind of assist with that as well, so that you can, quickly disable it without having to menu dive if you don't end up wanting to use it. Cool. All right, let's take a look at a couple more questions here. I am Hassan says, question, can we get the ability to assign shutter speed to a dial? I realize the limited buttons, but having the option would be an awesome addition. Can we get the ability to assign shutter speed to a dial? I guess you mean to a different dial? Shutter speed would have to, it's going to depend on the camera that you're on. Like the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark II X, you can swap shutter speed from front to back, if you want. But I think in general, it's not done because it's probably in general, I'm not saying for specific cases, but in general, it's not always going to be a good user experience, and could potentially cause more confusion and questions into service and support than it would in general for the others. Yeah, so we can ask. I just don't think you're gonna see that kind of change, at least on some of these cameras here. Where did we go here? Manual focus confirmation. Louis says, does the S5 IIX have the ability to use PDAF on 60 FPS full HD like the S9? Yeah, in APS-C. Sacred City, the image and color science on the GH6 is far and away the best I've ever seen. Was there something to Panasonic saying phase detect would affect the image? GH7 is nice, but no GH6. So yeah, processing with a PDAF sensor does change some of the, in general, functionality. I hear a number of people online talking about, well, it can't be phase detect because when you shoot, Blackmagic RAW or ProRes RAW, the image is totally different. And well, yeah, it's kind of the point. Blackmagic RAW and ProRes RAW are completely different. Those are literal data feeds out to the recorders, and then the recorder is putting that information together into a standardized piece of footage. In-camera processing, we have said over time that PDAF would change the look of some of the cameras, and every iteration, kind of as we go, we refine. As we do firmware updates, we refine things a little bit. You're rarely ever going to see maybe like a big firmware update, in the middle of a product life cycle that massively changes image quality. That causes all kinds of potential other problems. But for every person I hear that says that they prefer like an S5 or a GH6 image quality versus the GH7, I hear the equal number of people that are the exact opposite. Something I think that, I noticed initially right out of the gate between the two cameras is that when you look at a phase hybrid system versus a contrast DFD system, the contrast DFD systems were always moving focus, because that's inherently what a contrast system does. And you can have PDAF cameras emulate this when you shoot either really high ISOs or stop all the way down on lenses. And I don't care what brand it is, there are limits to it. When cameras tend to get into those, particular areas, the images soften up and you start to, things kind of change. When you're working with PDAF, because you can be so critically accurate with the autofocus, things look a heck of a lot sharper, which changes what kind of processing you have to do to the image to maintain a baseline image quality. So you will have differences between them. But again, every person I hear that says they like, the older gen cameras image processing, I hear the same amount that say the new one. In fact, actually, in general, you hear a lot more about the new ones because of the benefits of PDAF versus the older system we used. So it's kind of like the flip screen conversation. I know if I polled all of you, half of you are going to like flip, half of you are going to like tilt, and almost everyone's going to agree that you want to have the screen from the GH7 or something like it. So yeah, it's a challenge, I think, for all manufacturers. Dave says, would love a definite explanation on the AF custom settings. I'm struggling to get consistent sharp images when bride walking down. This should be an easy task for AF. If you can expand on what it is that you mean for a definite explanation of AF custom settings, other than the fact that AF custom settings on the cameras is literally designed... oh, that's the wrong one. The AF custom settings are literally designed as kind of general benchmarks, so for types of activities. Something like bride walking down the aisle should be fine with, the set 1, the basic settings, because this isn't like fast action. But that's why you get all the control in there, is to be able to adjust speed. What AF mode are you using? Are you using full area, one area plus, zone? What are those modes that you're using? You're using subject detection. Those are all things that are going to change stuff like that. We do have we are... I have to remember where it's published so I can try to find it. We do have an autofocus guide published for the systems that gives you recommendations. Now, again, one recommendation may work for some people. It may not work for you. So yeah, a lot of the stuff just kind of changes a little bit, from user to user. So, Christy says, when I pair with a monitor, there seems to be a significant lag. Is there a way to mitigate the amount of lag? Check firmware updates. Check the quality of the HDMI cable that you're using. If you are using a cable that is like on the ragged edge of the throughput requirements, you can get lags, you can get drops, you can get flickers. Be careful with HDMI cables. And again, this is the normal troubleshooting process. I'm not saying 100% that this is exactly it, but it's always where I start first, because out of, 9 out of every 10 situation that we have when someone's got that question, it's an HDMI cable problem. HDMI cable marketing from all the various different manufacturers making them can be relatively suspect. Because of the variance in the ratings. Are you looking at HDMI 2, 2.1? Is it 2.1A, 2.1B? You don't really look at that. You want to look at what the throughput rating is. So I think it's like 12, 18, 24, 48 gigabit per second. The highest one that you can afford is going to be the best, and you really don't want to go anything below 18. Anything below 18 is going to be really not okay. It goes in line with my recommendation about SD cards. Buy the fastest SD cards that you can afford. They don't have to be top shelf, but you want to buy the fastest that you can get from reputable brands and sources. There can be a lot of snake oil out there in marketing about things like, especially in cables, if you come from the AV world or the audio world, you've probably heard a lot of this kind of stuff. The gold-plated, the extra twisted pairs, the hydrogen infused, like all that kind of stuff. Look for data sheets to get you the most accurate information. Actually, I think Linus Tech Tips did a really good video at this point, I think it was years ago, on HDMI cables. That can be a really good first place to start. You don't have to spend an arm and a leg on an HDMI cable, but you want to spend on the right ones. If that doesn't fix the problem, then you want to take a look at, first, usually I recommend taking a look at the monitor you're using. Make sure there isn't any kind of like stability firmware update. If there's a way to do a reset on the monitors, do a reset on the monitor. If that doesn't change anything, then go to the camera, do a factory reset of the camera, make sure that there's not any kind of settings that you have set in there that could be conflicting. In general, with all cameras, and I think this is true for all brands, if you have done firmware updates over the years, but you've never done a reset of your camera, do a reset of your camera after your firmware updates. Yes, it's a little bit annoying. Yes, it can be time consuming, but you do have the ability to save out your camera set files so you can reload them. Sometimes, like anything, if you've updated your Mac, if you've updated your Windows computers, your phones, there's a reason why they restart after doing an update, because one, you're initializing an update while the camera is still operating or the device is still operating. Not everything necessarily may fully take place until you do a reset, and basically just kind of reset the structures of everything. That can also clear up a number of potential issues or challenges you may run into. Matthew's here. Hey, how's it going, man? Best podcast you were on recently. I loved doing that podcast, man. That was fun. What would you say? What would you say when to use the different autofocus tracking modes? That's a good one. It's going to depend on the scenario that you're shooting in, right? So the motorcycle stuff that I photograph, unfortunately I haven't been out recently to be able to actually go do any of it. For things like motorcycles, sports, action, stuff like that, I come from the really kind of old school mentality of this, or quote unquote old school mentality, because I learned during the DSLR era. And back during that time period, you know, if my memory fully serves me right, Nikon was probably the number one in that era, with the 3D tracking focus, right? And being able to select multiple points on the camera. And we're talking like, you know, you had less than like 15, 20 autofocus points if you were lucky. So you would use groupings of theirs. So translating that to modern cameras, that's where I use, especially with ours, that's where I use the zone autofocus, and then I change the size of it. Gives me a little more flexibility in framing, lets me use the subject detection, stuff like that. I will also use the tracking autofocus as well. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, the tracking autofocus is all the way over here. It can be paired with our subject detection. What this does is this allows me to put a box down here, and you get a different style of box. So it'll do object tracking based on visual information. And then if you put this over a subject, you will get the subject detection, and subject detection will override that for you. This can work really well, although as I'm finding, specifically for things like the motorcycle photography that I do, with the newer cameras, being able to add, you know, extra functionality to the various detection modes and everything kind of getting more and more advanced, I find myself less and less using a tracking mode and just quickly changing through the mode that I want to, you know, adjust myself. What's nice is that in the quick menu, you can customize this. So for those that are still looking at saying like how you want to customize your particular camera, under the quick menu settings here, I actually, this isn't the normal camera that I have used here, but I actually come in and I change one of my quick menu options here to be subject. So I can come down and I can go, and of course I went the opposite way in the system here. I can do detecting subject, so that now when I click the Q menu, I can just scroll down or tap and just hit it right in there and then be able to cycle through. This makes it pretty quick for me to be able to go in and make some fast changes, so that I don't have to necessarily be diving super deep into the menus. Yes, you still have the ability to just push this button and then press display and get to the same menu. That's why you've got multiple different ways of being able to connect it, so it fits your style better. Aside from that, you know, it's really just kind of working with your own camera and figuring out what works best for you. For things like this, the live stream, I just have it on full area with face and eye detect on because I turn my head a lot, or on body detection, because I turn my face around a lot, and I know that our face and eye tracking is if I turn this way. If I turn this way, so I'm speaking into the microphone, it would default to the full area. Body allows a little more flexibility there. Let's see here. D Creative, which camera would you recommend to someone trying Lumix cameras for video? This will depend. How serious are you on video? If you are very serious into video content creation, that is where I would recommend either an S5 Mark II X or a GH7, since those are, you know, the kind of pinnacle lineup that we have right now. They're going to get you the widest functionality. Technically, the GH7 actually gets you the absolute highest level of functionality for video users that we offer. If you're dabbling in video, you want to get really good video, but you know you're not 100% sure if it's going to be like, you know, you need the top of the line. That's where you can take a look at the G9 Mark II or the S5 Mark II. Both incredibly capable video cameras. If size isn't a concern, if you want that DSLR style format. If you're getting in and you know that you're doing maybe more social media content, if you're constantly knowing that you need to be able to crop vertical, horizontal, or if you're just someone who prefers to edit on a mobile device, 100% hands down, the S9 is the camera I would recommend at that point. So you got a bunch of choices. You really can't go wrong with a video option within the Lumix line. One of our philosophies has always been that if we can do it in the camera for video, we're going to carry it through the lineup. So that's why things like the anamorphic desqueeze functionalities, the anamorphic stabilization, shutter angle, waveform, vector scope, luminance spot meter, dual zebras, all of those things are in these cameras, and it doesn't matter what level it is within any of the modern cameras. Even if it's a photography camera, it's going to have that stuff in it because it's already developed. It doesn't cost anything to put those in the camera, so it doesn't change any of that. It's just a feature. If you don't need it, don't use it. But that means that if you're coming in from a video side, you really kind of have your full-blown choice of what cameras you want to go with, because you're not really going to get anything less. It comes down more to the specific codecs. That's the word I'm trying to think of. Still need a lot more coffee today. DJ, thank you for the kind words, DJ. I appreciate that. And we're glad that you're still here. Derek says, any plans on a lens update for the 26mm f8? The focus peaking isn't accurate and requires additional punch-in focus, otherwise the image isn't clear. It's not that I know of. We don't... For those that always ask about future product, future cameras, future lenses, stuff like that, if you are new here, we do not talk about those things because I either don't have authorization to talk about stuff that maybe I know or I don't know, and I really like keeping my job. If you've been around a while, you know I say that a lot. And two, it's just, unless there's something to talk about, you're only ever going to see it from an official statement. And that would be, a product announcement, a lens announcement, a firmware announcement, whatever it is. You would see that as an official kind of communication, and then we will talk about them here. I have been part of product launches, clearly, over the last couple of years. So, I will talk about anything new that we get, but only when we are ready and cleared to be able to talk about new things. So, DJ, that crazy active stabilization the S5 Mark II, Mark II X have? Can we have it for photography? I think it's super stable. Photos could be a very cool thing. Funny you should mention that, DJ. So, I think a little bit maybe of a misconception with stabilization. So like with electronic stabilization in the video side. So in video stabilization, the general effects are less than what you get in photography. The photography stabilization is going to be the highest, most powerful stabilization you can get in modern cameras. And I'm fairly certain this is true for almost any brand out there. We just happen to be the best at it. So when you look at a lot of these advancements that are happening for the video side, so things like Boost IS, when we introduced that for, tripod steady or monopod steady style stabilization, those are modes where we know that we're going out of the bounds of what motion stabilization should be accounting for. And by that I mean that if you've used Boost IS on the cameras, that is a mode designed for not moving the camera. Anyone online that tells you just turn Boost IS on and move with the camera, they're wrong. 100% you're wrong. Don't listen to that information. I can't tell you how many times I've had to troubleshoot people saying that they have jittery footage or it kind of like jerks around. It's because they're walking and they listen to someone who said turn Boost IS on. Don't do that. The electronic stabilization, the newest improvements that we've done on the cameras, those are much more advanced ways of doing stabilization now, using the high precision gyro information that we have within the camera, the actual optical information that we have of the lenses that are attached. That level of stabilization is specifically designed because it has to counteract the fact that you're looking at at minimum 24 pictures per second. On the still side, you already have all of these benefits. You already have the highest strength, highest stability. Video side, it's about balancing the fact that you're seeing at minimum 24 of these back to back. So little wobbles, things like that. That's where you start to see the change there. So, yeah, like the active IS stuff, the kind of overarching technology that covers all of our stabilization. Yes, in photography you have it. You're already getting some of the leading side there. Video, you have to do a little bit extra in some cases because you have to offset the motion side of the capture. OXDC, can you enable video recording with the 12.5mm f12 on a GH7? That would be a question for engineering teams way higher up. Since the 3D the lens that the person's referencing is a 3D lens. I do not think there will ever be support for that lens again. That lens, if I remember right, when you used it on the GH2, had a specific format that was also recorded for it so that it could be played back as 3D. The modern cameras, that lens and that system doesn't exist anymore, to my knowledge. So yeah, unfortunately, there's not really that high of a chance of ever seeing that lens get adoption for modern systems here. Mr. says, whoa, thank you, YouTube. Mr. says, can a LUT generated in Pixelmator Pro be used in an S9? I tried quick export of the .cube file and it did not load, saying it was not compatible. Any help would be appreciated. As Logan comments right below you, make sure it's 33 point, not 66. When you go to the really high precision LUTs, that's, I think, where some of the challenges come in. Really high precision LUTs are for editing side. You're going to use those on the actual NLE. 33 point and I think it's like 17 point is the next one down. Those are going to be for monitoring and loading into cameras because you're limited on the file size. Excuse me. So yeah, try doing 33 point if you have that ability. You also have to make sure, depending on the card that you're using in the camera, will change what character length you can use and which file type you can use. If you're using an SDHC card just to get them on the camera, it's very rare these days, but I have to make sure that I make it clear. An SDHC card, which uses a FAT32 formatting, cannot work with the 255 character limit that the .cube files that you can load onto the cameras now. Those cards, the SDHC cards, you're limited to .vlt, and it's an 8 character limit total. If you're using an SDXC card, which is basically 64 gigs or larger these days, that will allow you, naming-wise, to do .cube files and to take the full range of up to 255 characters for the name. Clearly, you don't want to do 255 characters because you'd take forever as it scrolls across the screen. So yeah, first, check to make sure it's 33 point or lower, and make sure you're using the right card. Make sure you're also putting it in the right spot. It just goes in the... for those that may have never done it, you can load Luts onto the camera this way because you just, by putting them on the card, but you just put them in the root folder of the card and then put it in the camera and tell the camera where to look for them. So, yeah, I would try those first. Logan, any hope of getting the Silver S9 in the US? Been holding out. Unfortunately, it's not my call. I like the Silver S9. What I did to mine was I went to that company AlphaGuard and I just turned mine into a silver with a skin. It is 100% your choice to do stuff like that with skins on the cameras. It's not a service that we do, so just kind of keep that in mind. You are adding a vinyl layer onto the camera, but I liked that setup because I could basically turn it into any color. I mean, my S1R is camouflaged. It's like winter camoed. Just because, one, it's a full spectrum infrared converted one, and I wanted to be able to pick it out of the other S1R that I have there, so that I know which one I'm working with. So, yeah. McCary says, hey, Sean, nice informative stream. Just the usual feature request, in-camera stacking, pre-buffer for video. Thank you for definitely, adding those in. It's always... I know in some cases it may feel like broken records, but definitely making sure that you make those comments, that you make those suggestions, recommendations for things that you want to see in the future, it does help us. You may not ever hear really fast turnaround on things getting added in that you'll recommend in the chat, but it does help. So, yeah. I am says, sorry, I meant customizing a shutter speed dial on the S9. Okay, gotcha. I use lenses with aperture rings. This would add extra flexibility for the S9. Awesome. I will do a little bit of research and I will pass some information on to the engineers about that specifically. Cool. Yeah. Let's see here. David, I've tried set one. I use one area, no subject detect. I would try subject detection, Dave, for, if I remember right, that's the wedding scenario. Yeah. Sorry that sometimes it takes a little bit to catch back up to the responses you have. I don't like running these live streams in the ultra low latency thing on YouTube because I find way more problems with it, with like drops and stuff. So sometimes it takes a minute to get back to follow-up conversations. Yeah, so Dave, I would try with the subject detection with, human body. And if you're using one area, you're not going to have a ton of them on there. You're going to have the subject detection only show up where that box is pointed. It should help. Otherwise, we do get a lot of the commentary, and the engineering team does hear about, kind of working on improving the usability, improving things like UI and all that kind of stuff for the autofocusing system. So, let's see here. RW, thanks for the streams. Lovely and useful distraction to an otherwise horrible end of a day. I'm sorry you're having a horrible day or a horrible end of your day. I hope everything's okay. I never like hearing people having necessarily a bad day. Chin up, enjoy the disassociation or the distraction, and if this helps get mind off other things that may be going on, then listen away. We've got over 250 of these live streams that we've done. But yeah, I hope you're doing okay. Take care of yourself, and just remember, time moves on. For whatever it is, I'm gonna move on from that now. Sorry. All right, I got time for 2 more questions, or 3 more questions, the last 3 that I see on the screen here, and then we're actually going to have to call it for today, because we're at 5 after 2 already, and I have other meetings that I have to be on, so. Let's see here. DJ, opinion on third-party non-L-mount members doing AF class. I mean, from my position, cool. It's not stuff like that is so far above my level within the company as far as like what's happening, how they're doing it, anything like that. I am all for using the correct optic or what optic works best for you. I have a couple like TT Artisan and manual focus lenses that I love using on the cameras for specific reasons. I think the one thing you have to remember, and it's true of basically everyone outside of the L-mount Alliance, this is going to be something that's pretty true, is that when you do go to third-party lenses, so lenses that are not part of the L-mount Alliance, you are probably going to be giving something up, whether it's autofocus speed or customization of things like manual focus throw or, potential reliability. That's what the L-mount Alliance is about, is that you can go to Sigma, Leica, Panasonic, you can go to Samyang as they have the one lens out. You can go to those lenses and you know that you're going to get the same experience, and it's going to be a quality experience. Outside companies making lenses, I think if you look at some of the early, options that are out there, there's some oddities about it. I think Richard Wong has done some really good, coverage of, some of those lenses. So you do get some weird, oddities with lenses like that. But if it works for you, it's your camera. Go for it. More the merrier. Let's see here. Joe says, please remind Panasonic to create a chart where DR boost works for each ISO, please. I have asked. I have not gotten any response back yet on that one. It's a pretty low on the priority thing as far as other things that we've got working on. I think it's Panico? Panico. Hi, Sean. Do you know why the G9 Mark II is slow compared to one on writing and sometimes also reading from the cards using V60 here? This has been covered numerous times online. If you look at outlets that are not totally biased one way or another, whether they're Lumix fans or they're OM fans, the file sizes that the Lumix cameras are writing are much bigger than the file sizes that the Olympus cameras are writing. So if you normalize what the file sizes are between the two of them, you see that they are actually writing at about the same speeds. Because of that, we in some cases show slower, but we are writing more information. We are a higher resolution camera. We are a higher image quality camera that is a actual definitive. The image quality coming out of the G9 Mark II and the GH7 is appreciably better than what you can get out of some of the other cameras out there when you look at the scientific testing. Real world, everyone has your own preferences on that kind of stuff. But at fact, we are writing higher resolution, larger file sizes than what Olympus does, and at file size normalization, they're about the same time between it. So the speeds to clear come down to the fact that you get a higher res, higher data, or larger file size file on our camera. All right, and then last one, the Wolf. You calling the Wolf? It's one of my favorite scenes in Pulp Fiction. I think it says, can you make 1.6 Desqueeze for the S5 2X so it fits proper with the Sirui anamorphic lenses? We have 1.5, we have 1.8, but not 1.6. This has been a very long standing question that a lot of us have had with the engineering team. I think in general, you have to partially remember that the 1.6x anamorphic lenses, they've taken a really long time in the grand scheme of anamorphic lenses being available, especially in an affordable perspective, to come to market and actually be at a point where mass majority can afford them. And they're actually, you know, decently good lenses. That side of it, when it comes to the manufacturer side, on actually supporting that desqueeze and tuning things for, you know, the stabilization and all that kind of stuff, that takes a lot of time too, because it's not as simple as just like changing one figure and adjusting the squeeze slightly. 1.5, 9 out of 10 times is so close to it anyway. But basically, it's more about things like stabilization and ensuring that the actual squeeze ratio is done correctly. It takes a bit of time, and a lot of that stuff tends to go into the various different scenarios of, you know, how important is this? Is this something that we're getting, you know, huge amounts of requests for, or is this a certain, you know, section of the internet that's asking for this? So you have to balance a lot of that stuff out. And unfortunately, in some cases, there are other things that we're being asked about to do or implement in the cameras that are going to take priority. So certain features may, you know, take a back seat for a little while. But that's why the more and more you ask and the more you let us know in these chats and you know, throughout the various social media platforms that we have, it helps us get that point over and helps us, you know, kind of justify priority of certain requests. So, excuse me. All right. So, with that, thank you, everybody, for a ton of the awesome questions and the back and forth. I love doing these streams. These things are so much fun. If you have come from Matthew's podcast, that we did, welcome. Thank you for tuning in and listening to us. Subscribe if you feel that you liked the content here and you want to get notified when we do more of these. If you are already an existing subscriber for the channel, thank you so much for coming back to these streams and adding your voice into the chat. We will be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. 100%. We will actually be back live next Thursday. And I'm working on what the topic's going to be for that one. I've had a lot of other kind of stuff working in the process, so I haven't really thought about exactly what I want to talk about. So, if there is a topic that you want to see us cover next week, or something you want to learn more about, drop it in the comment section after this video is posted. And I can tailor, you know, set some time across for next week's live stream to talk about your specific topic. The most interesting topic I'll probably pick, you know, if you happen to throw an interesting topic in there. I love talking about some of the weird, obscure stuff that you can do with these cameras. But yeah, other than that, thanks for tuning in. Subscribe if you don't already. Drop a like on the video if you haven't already and you like the content. That helps us get this out to more people. And yeah, other than that, if you haven't seen the interview with Matthew, go over to Matthew Danu's website or his YouTube channel and check out his series of podcasts and video podcasts with a number of various creators, photographers, videographers, and I was on there recently. And yeah, outside of that, have a good rest of your day. Have a good weekend. Get out there, create some cool stuff. And yeah, that's about it. I'm wrapping up now. Later.